I know it's sudden, but for those of you who just clicked because of the thumbnail and want the quick answer, here it is. Mihawk is a descendant of the Nerona family, born in the world below. I go into all the details in the Mihawk section, but if you watch from the beginning, you'll also get a sense of how Oda-sensei may have come up with the term celestial dragons and what might have really happened during the Void Century. Last week, I was really happy to see so many comments on the video I'd shared quite a while ago, the one about Yonko being taken over by Emu. That was right after Chapter 1149 dropped, and it felt great to see the theory getting attention. But this week, things got even better. Both of these videos got a ton of comments too. The one about Emu's true identity being a demon dragon, and the one about Elbaf being the land of devils. Looks like another wave is hitting us this week. And the best part is, I've still got several more videos lined up that are just about ready to hit their peak. So sit back, relax, and enjoy your time here on this channel. We're just getting started. I usually make videos like this where I break down meanings that get lost in the English translation, offering insights from a native Japanese perspective. What I especially want to focus on today is the way dragons are used differently in the story, particularly when it comes to the celestial dragons. In the English version of One Piece, the word dragon is always translated the same way, but in Japanese, Oda-sensei clearly uses different kanji depending on the type of dragon he's referring to, and that difference is key. Also, I'll talk about a Japanese proverb that was mentioned in One Piece and how it might actually give us a huge clue about Mihawk's origins. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of mistranslations floating around, especially from Google Translate, so if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. I also work professionally in Japanese translation and marketing, so if you're interested in that kind of support, feel free to reach out anytime. All right, let's dive into the main topic. So, let's start with a question. Why did the people from the 20 kingdoms, the ones who founded the world government, start calling themselves celestial dragons? The answer might actually be hidden in Chapter 1150, where we saw Emu, the top of the world government, transform into a devil-like form. But here's the key. That devil form has a strong connection to dragons. In medieval art, demons and even Satan were often depicted using dragon-like imagery. Things like bat-like wings, claws, tails, and horns. These features all overlap with how dragons were drawn. And in the scene where Sabo confronted Emu at Mariajoie, we even saw Emu take on a dragon-like face while swallowing flames. So it's very possible that Emu will transform even more dramatically into a dragon-like figure in the future. But there's something we need to clarify here. In the world of One Piece, there are actually two different types of dragons. One is the winged dragon, like the kind we saw living on Punk Hazard. The other is the serpent-like dragon with a long snake-like body, like Kaido or Momonosuke. Now both types share some traits. They're heat-resistant and can breathe fire, but the way they fly is completely different. The winged dragons fly using their wings, pretty straightforward, but the serpent-style dragons don't have wings at all. Instead, they fly by generating flame clouds and riding them through the sky. What's even more interesting is that in English, both types are just called dragon, but in Japanese, Oda-sensei actually uses different kanji depending on the type of dragon he's referring to. When talking about the winged dragons like the ones we saw on Punk Hazard, he uses this specific character, but for the long, serpent-like dragons, like Kaido or Momonosuke, he uses a different kanji altogether. And here's the kicker. The kanji used for the winged dragon is the same one that appears in the term Tenryubuto, the celestial dragons. So in the world of One Piece, this type of dragon seems to represent either the true devils themselves or the celestial dragons who control that power. That's why in this video, I'm predicting that Emu, the one at the very top of the celestial dragons, will take on a form that looks like a winged dragon, complete with demonic horns and massive wings. By the way, this difference between the two dragon kanji is actually something One Piece magazine has covered too. Let's take a look at it together. Ryuma became a legend for slaying a dragon. But in Wano, the one now worshipped as a guardian deity, or Myoo, is Kaido, a different kind of dragon. Over the course of 23 years, the role and image of the dragon have completely flipped from enemy to protector. And this shift isn't just about kanji. It could reflect a broader change in public perception. By solidifying the use of the character dragon, it might even be a political move to rewrite history. And by the way, I've translated the full article from One Piece magazine for my Patreon members. So if that kind of deep dive interests you, feel free to check out the site. I think this is where one of One Piece's core themes is hiding. It's the idea that history can be rewritten through language. Think about it. Why did the clan of D, once enemies of the world government, become feared? Why are the fruits that grant people's hopes and dreams called devil fruits? Why are the scholars who studied the poneglyphs labeled as devils? It all points to the same thing. The celestial dragons, who were the victors of the war during the Void Century, rewrote history, and they did it by changing the words people used. And the same goes for the word dragon. According to that One Piece magazine excerpt, Wano originally saw dragons, written with this kanji, dragon, as enemies. Which makes sense, because the Kozuki family closed off Wano's borders to protect it from a massive external force. That force was almost certainly the world government. And who sits at the top of the world government? The celestial dragons, and their name uses this specific kanji for winged dragon. So it's likely that this version of dragon, the winged one represented by this character, has become a symbol of the world government itself. On the flip side, you could say that 800 years ago, it was this serpent-type dragon that was seen as the greatest enemy by the people of the 20 kingdoms. Remember, the world government's main enemy back then was Joy Boy, and one of the nations associated with him was Wano Kuni. And now, interestingly enough, it's Momonosuke, the one prophesied to bring about the dawn of the world, who can transform into that same type of serpent-like dragon. So if Luffy, who's inherited Joy Boy's will, ends up fighting alongside this kind of dragon, it would be a nightmare scenario for the world government. From their perspective, it's the ultimate combo of two ancient enemies joining forces. And speaking of dragons, let's not forget Odachi's one-shot manga, Monsters. In that story, the protagonist Ryuma slays a winged dragon. The one who summoned that dragon and tried to use it to steal the town's treasure? That was Cyrano, a character who was most likely the prototype for Mihawk. And Mihawk's full name? Drakul Mihawk. All right, let's finally get into the possible connection between Mihawk and Imu. First of all, there's the question of whether Mihawk is actually a celestial dragon or not, and there are a few hints that suggest he might be. First off, both Mihawk's name and appearance are clearly inspired by Dracula. The name Dracula actually comes from the Romanian Draculea, which means son of Drakul. In medieval Romanian, Drakul meant dragon. And that's because Vlad II, the historical figure, was part of a Christian order of knights called the Order of the Dragon. As I mentioned earlier, dragons in One Piece tend to make us think of the celestial dragons. There's another really interesting hint about this in Kuma's flashback. At one point, Connie quotes a Japanese proverb, "The skilled hawk hides its talons." It means that truly capable or intelligent people don't show off. They keep their strengths hidden instead of flaunting them. Now, when you hear hawk, who comes to mind? Exactly. Hawkeye Mihawk. He never brags about his power. In fact, he's the kind of guy who'd rather spend his days quietly farming than showing off in the spotlight. When Mihawk first met Zoro, he asked him what he was aiming for. Zoro's answer? To be the strongest. He probably looked down on that kind of straightforward ambition, just trying to prove strength through a simple power struggle. And that's why he called Zoro a weak one. Now let's fast forward to the moment when Zoro later bowed his head and asked Mihawk to train him. Mihawk asked, "Why would you lower your head?" And Zoro replied, "So I can surpass you." Of course, that was Zoro's honest answer. But more than that, I think the real reason he wanted to grow stronger was for Luffy's sake. And when Mihawk realized that, when he saw that Zoro was willing to swallow his pride, even humiliate himself for something greater than his own ego, he burst out laughing and agreed to train him. What I'm trying to say is, in that moment, Zoro was hiding his true motive. He was showing a side of himself that looked weak, kneeling, bowing. But in reality, that action was driven by the strongest reason of all. In other words, he was embodying the saying, "The skilled hawk hides its talons." And I think that's exactly what moved the heart of the world's greatest swordsman. Hawkeye Mihawk. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there. Let's get back on track. The word talons also makes us think of the hoof of the flying dragon, the mark of the celestial dragons. Remember, Hancock didn't want anyone to see that claw-shaped mark because it was a symbol of her time as a slave. But in Mihawk's case, it could be symbolic. He's hiding his own claws, not literal ones, but a metaphor for his lineage. A hawk hiding its talons could be more than just a proverb. Mihawk may be hiding the fact that he's descended from the celestial dragons. Now, Mihawk's sword is called Yoru, which literally means night in Japanese. In One Piece, they often use katakana for names to leave the meaning open to interpretation, but this one's written with kanji, so there's no ambiguity. It definitely means night. And that ties into a key phrase in One Piece, the dawn of the world. In Japanese, dawn is yoake, which literally means the night becomes bright. That's where the word comes from. Yo for night, and ake for bright. So when Pedro said there are people waiting for the world's dawn, he was suggesting the world is still, in a sense, in the middle of its night. Even the Gorosei's name literally means 5 elder stars, and the star-like symbols around Imu's throne seem to hint that the current world government could symbolize the night itself. That would make Mihawk's sword, Yoru, a perfect symbol of this night.
Creature of the night! Creature of the night!
Now, let's finally get into why we can say that Mihawk is a descendant of the Nerona family. So first, when Imu took over Gunko's body, those strange eyes appeared on her too. At this point, those eyes have basically become Imu's trademark. You'll see this kind of eye design pop up with other characters too, but in most cases, it's only temporary. Like when Hakuba shows up on Cavendish's face, or when they use it to show Robin's rage, those eyes come and go. But there are a few characters who always have that kind of eye. Mihawk is one of them. You could probably group Zunisha and Caribou in there too, to some extent. Actually, I've got something I want to say about Caribou, so I might include that in a video I'm working on about Blackbeard. But back to the eyes, those red, triple-ringed eyes? Only Imu and Mihawk have those. That's why some people are saying, wait, could Mihawk be Imu's child? Honestly, that seems a bit unlikely to me. Still, the idea that Mihawk might be from the Nerona bloodline, that's definitely possible. And speaking of Imu, since they're said to be from the Nerona family, well, there's a bit of a wordplay hidden in that name too. Nerona sounds like a Japanese pun. neroyo, or hayaku nerona, as in, it's night, go to bed already. You can almost hear a father saying it to his child who's staying up too late. There's actually a recurring pattern we see with the celestial dragons, and that is siblings who end up walking completely different paths. Take Doflamingo and Corazon, for example. Doflamingo came down to the surface and, after being brutally rejected and attacked by the people, turned into a pirate bent on destroying the world. On the other hand, Rocinante became a marine and tried to stop Doflamingo's plans. Then we have Shanks and Shamrock. Shamrock is currently serving as the captain of the God's Knights in Maria Joie, while Shanks came down to the surface and chose the life of a pirate. I think something similar might have happened in the Nerona family 800 years ago. Imu had a sibling, but unlike Imu, that sibling had no interest in power. After the war with Joy Boy ended, he didn't move to Maria Joie like the others. Instead, he stayed behind in the kingdom the Nerona family originally ruled over. Remember, the 20 kings were each monarchs of separate kingdoms on the surface before uniting. Just like the Don Quixote family once ruled Dressrosa, it's possible the Nerona family ruled a kingdom we've already seen in the story. In that kingdom, a branch of the Nerona family quietly continued their lineage over the centuries, and after 800 years, Mihawk was born into that line. So that's my take. Mihawk, born in the world below, could be the last living descendant of the once great Nerona bloodline. And it's very likely that Imu's sibling also knew Imu had been consumed by some kind of demonic power. Just like Rocinante kept an eye on the Don Quixote family from within the Navy to try and stop Doflamingo from destroying the world, I think Imu's sibling made the decision to pass down some kind of countermeasure to stop Imu. And that, I believe, is what's been passed down to Mihawk, Yoru, the world's strongest black blade. Or perhaps it's the small cross-shaped dagger he always wears around his neck like a pendant. That might play an important role too. After all, in our world, it's common knowledge that a cross is considered one of the classic weaknesses of devils. So maybe that concept carries over into the world of One Piece as well. In fact, remember Usopp, back on Thriller Bark, where all those creepy supernatural creatures were lurking, he actually used a cross as a charm to ward off evil. Now, it's also possible that, at some point, the kingdom ruled by the Nerona branch family was randomly wiped out on a whim by Imu. Maybe they were labeled as part of the indigenous cleansing campaign we've heard about. That would give real weight to Mihawk's line, where he refers to the celestial dragons, who hunt rabbits, as foolish beasts who go all out just to hunt a rabbit. If Mihawk experienced that kind of destruction firsthand, then his bitterness and that metaphor make perfect sense. Coincidence or not, the country recently wiped out by Imu's orders, and its ruler was Drakul. Now, there's one more thing I want to draw your attention to again, and that's the main idea in this video. I put forward the theory that Elbaf was originally a land of devils. And honestly, with what we saw in chapter 1150, that idea might be closer to the truth than we thought. The Elbaf warriors were transformed into devil-like beings, and the double-page spread made them look like an actual army of devils. On top of that, when they grew in size, their appearance started to resemble the ancient giants. And if you think about it, characters like Oars and the ancient giants have always been drawn to look very devilish. It really feels like Oda-sensei is deliberately trying to make us link the ancient giants with devils, like he's hinting at some deeper connection between the two. In other words, the devils that Oda-sensei has been hinting at recently might have actually lived in Elbaf in the past. In fact, during the film Red commentary screening, when asked about the true nature of Tot Musica, Oda-sensei said something very interesting. The existence of Devil Kings isn't depicted in the main story, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. In Japan, there's a well-known rumor that Oda-sensei hadn't actually planned to do an Elbaf arc when Wano ended. But if that's true, it's possible that the story was restructured on the fly, and that's why this Devil King figure was suddenly written into the plot to play a key role. First, there's someone in Elbaf who appears to have inherited features associated with devilish beings, even in the imaginations of Elbaf's own children. That person is Loki, the son of Elbaf's king. Now, take a good look at his horns. They have the exact same shape as the devils we've seen before. Because Loki wears a helmet, it's hard to see clearly, but it's very likely that these horns are actually growing from his head, and the fact that they're black makes the devilish connection even stronger. One thing that really stands out this time is how the giants who were turned into devils started growing black horns. That detail definitely catches the eye. Unlike Hyrudian, Loki is believed to have inherited a strong bloodline from Harold, a direct descendant of the ancient giants, which likely made him as massive as oars from birth. In fact, Harold's horns were black too, and they even grew in the same direction as Loki's. So, if the royal bloodline of Elbaf carries these distinct devil-like horns, then it could very well mean that Elbaf was originally a land where devils once lived. Now, let's take a closer look at the abyss that runs through Orist Castle. I actually believe this abyss might have originally been something passed down within Elbaf's royal family. Why? Well, in certain mythologies, the abyss is said to be a place where devils or lost souls are trapped. But since Elbaf has long tried to hide its connection to devils, it makes sense that Laud found it disturbing when he saw it. In fact, on Namakura Island, where Brook was sent, a similar abyss-like structure was used for devil summoning rituals. This suggests that Elbaf may have had similar rituals in the past. Elbaf is divided into 3 distinct layers, and each layer is represented by a particular kanji character. While some languages might translate this kanji as world, its actual meaning is closer to a separated space, more accurately, a domain. And here's where things get even more interesting. This same terminology is used in another place, the demon realm of Impel Down. As you all know, Impel Down has symbols that resemble ancient script, and for some reason, its most important guards look like cosplayers dressed as devils, complete with horns and wings. If you take a closer look, you'll notice that Saldith's horns are almost identical to Loki's. Honestly, we've already seen that Impel Down is crawling with monstrous creatures, so it wouldn't be surprising if Elbaf once used the abyss to summon devils directly from Impel Down. There's a scene in Impel Down that shows up when prisoners start mysteriously disappearing. Now, this might be a hint that Impel Down was once used as a place to summon demons, and over time, that truth got twisted and passed down among the prisoners as some kind of legend. What really stands out here is the phrase the guard uses, "Gate of the Demon World." That clearly seems to be a reference to the abyss. On top of that, Impel Down currently holds some key figures who will likely play major roles in the story going forward, like Doflamingo and Bentham. There's also a chance that Arbor and Weevil are being held there as well. If that's the case, then we could see an event where they emerge from the abyss in Elbaf, as if stepping out from the underworld itself. Back in the Marineford War, the escapees fell from the sky, but in Elbaf, what if we get the opposite? Imagine the Impel Down prisoners suddenly emerging from Elbaf's abyss. That would be a wild twist.
面白くなってきた
Another crucial revelation from Ripley is that Elbaf's weaknesses are lightning and fire. This makes a lot of sense. Since Elbaf's villages are built on top of massive tree trunks, a lightning strike could easily start a fire, making it a major vulnerability. But there's more to it. I believe this weakness is also connected to the idea that Elbaf is the land of devils. After all, in many myths, devils are said to be weak to light, so it's only natural that lightning, which brings light, would be a weakness to them. In the world of One Piece, the celestial dragons are referred to as gods, and their natural enemy is said to be the D clan. There's even a saying meant to scare misbehaving children: if you're bad, the D will come and eat you. In that sense, they are seen as something like devils. The scholars of Ohara, who continued to study the forbidden history of the Void Century, were also labeled as devils by the world government. In One Piece, the opposite of God is devil, and there's one man who outright called himself a god and wielded lightning. This is a Japanese wordplay that carries two meanings: I am a god and I am lightning, a god who controls lightning. If that's the case, then it makes sense that Elbaf, the land of devils, would have lightning as its weakness. And because Elbaf itself is essentially a giant tree, fire becomes an even bigger threat. Now, here's something interesting. Ripley didn't say he, the Japanese word for fire, but instead used kaji. In Japanese, kaji specifically refers to a fire disaster, something that spreads and causes destruction. And I'm sure you've already realized what this means. Arbor, the Lunarian, is known as Kasai no King, King, Fire Disaster. There's also something that Dory, one of Elbaf's warriors, once said: the only thing we cannot pierce is the blood-soaked serpent. Most interpretations agree that this refers to the Red Line, and I also believe that's the case. Now, here's where it all connects. The Lunarians, Arbor's ancestors, once lived on top of the Red Line. In other words, Elbaf's warriors are unable to pierce through the very land where the Lunarians once lived. So, in the end, fire disaster is Elbaf's weakness in two ways, both literally as fire itself and symbolically through Lunarians, the fire disaster.